So, Chris, as I was thinking about, as I watched the film, and I was thinking about your work in it, how difficult is for an editor to be presented with a movie that is mostly shot in
Oh, it's a
it's one
huge
room? Is it
challenge.
fun? And
I think I've got it now. This better? Oh, it's a huge challenge to do that. But just in terms of like the film itself is a challenge. It's just you have this really extraordinary script that Seth and Will wrote, which it's so demented, so crazy that like just the fact of putting up the money to do it is so great. I just love that. And also it has an undercurrent of influence with the Buñuel film The Exterminating Angel, which was a kind of a favorite of my own. It's something that I saw in a double feature in 1975. I went to see Viridiana, and it was the second feature, and it was like a life changer. It was like the repeated shot. You know what I'm talking about? It's just an amazing. And what it's about, it's a group of wealthy people who are having a dinner after the opera, and they go to their home, and the guests come in, and the entire staff is leaving, very very mysteriously leaving, like something's just wrong, and they're just like they're just so taken aback that they just don't know what the word no means, which I think a lot of our guests here have that relationship to service. But they end up not being able to leave the room that they have their coffee in, and they're there for like 2 months. And I highly recommend it. You can see on Criterion, The Exterminating Angel, Louis Buñuel. But just the sheer fact of it, and then the creation of that, how to make this insane piece.
were you in it from the very
Oh,
beginning
from
in
the
the
very beginning.
project?
I did the first pass in my house around the corner because they were shooting in Savannah, and like this, like kind of early post COVID shooting was very difficult, and it was good. I was doing it remotely, and that was just to get to the kind of what I guess I'm trying to get to is the interpretation of what it means to go from a great script to the realization of such. And it was a wonderful choice of director. Director reached out to me, and it's like a tonal feat to get something like this to work because it's so out there.
And then there is not only the comedy, but there is the suspense.
That's the interweaving and the confluence of hitting the comedy, hitting the tension, hitting the kind of horror tropes within it as well, are all like it's a real dance. You really have to really work it.
For you, if you don't know, Chris also edited A Quiet Place, which is a major suspense work of suspense. Yeah,
I also edited Moneyball,
yeah,
Capote, Metropolitan was my
yes,
first film.
yes. In fact, Metropolitan. I read something you wrote about Metropolitan, and what was the script, what was the footage, and how it evolved.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Yeah. It was like nobody knew what they were going to get, kind of a thing. It was like one of the parents of one of the girls in it said, "Aren't they going to like show this in like a school basement or something?" Like that? But actually, I mean, that was a feat of production because it was like that was made for $235,000 with a 35 millimeter blow up.
And that was your first
Yes,
feature,
that
and
was
it
my
was
first
also
feature.
with Stillman's first
Yes.
first film.
And I did Barcelona also with Wit.
Yeah, how
But I
different?
was priced out after that.
Well, how different it is when you work on a smaller independent film,
Oh,
or when you
freedom.
do something
It's called
like
freedom. Like when you're doing indie movies that there's no money at stake, you can do what you really seriously want to do. when you're working on something that's like $50 million and has huge stars in it and stuff, and you've got a studio, you've got many people to answer to. And many times that can be very good. Like in this situation, Searchlight, they were brilliant. And the producers, Hyper Object, that was Betsy Koch and Adam McKay, they were incredibly supportive. They were great. There was one thing, I gotta tell you, one thing that was like torture was that Adam McKay had some screening, and he came out of the screening saying, "We got to cut the when they go outside of the restaurant." And Mark and I were like, "You're insane. That's ridiculous." And I mean, talk about how difficult it is to have it in one room
yeah.
to like get rid of the one time you're out of the one room. So that was a battle, but we won.
And how difficult is? I mean, a lot of what an editor does is also looking at performances and
Please.
balancing
It's
actors.
like it's all about performance. That's number one. And the ensemble here. I mean, Rafe Fiennes to make that character so intensely correct. I can't say real because it's beyond real. it's just like right. You know, like his balance of murderous. It's almost like murderous politeness. It's beyond imagination. It's very, very interesting. What he does with his eyes, what he does with the slightest movement of his mouth, and I could go on about every single actor here. I mean, Hung Chow, brilliant. Nicholas Hoult, brilliant. Anya. Janet McTeer as the restaurant critic, and Paul Adelson, who plays her like sycophantic editor, who everything's like, oh yes, yeah, I saw that when it came out.
And some of these actors you don't associate to comedy at all.
Oh yeah, no. It was like it was very well. It was beautifully cast. And Mark's great with that. Mark Mala, the director, I want to put out. He's you all know him from Succession. He's the director of, let's say, 80% of Succession. He's directed, and he's very, very talented. Really fun guy too.
Speaking of freedom, I understand that you one of the first, besides being a film goer, one of the first. Relationship you had with film is a course in experimental class in experimental film with Robert Breer. How that influenced your approach?
I went to art school. I didn't go to film school. I went to Cooper Union. I took kind of everything. I was like mostly photography, but sculpture and painting and drawing. But I always loved movies, like really like loved them, but I had no sense of what that would be as something to actually do. And in my last few years, I took a wonderful course with Robert Breer, an experimental filmmaker, very talented and wonderful artist. And I just like fell in love with just, I would make these collage films that I'd shoot off of television and like make these new constructions of. And I kind of owned the little Steenbeck, little 4 plate, that it was fun. And then I just like felt like it was galvanizing. It was like, I can do this. I can take this out there and figure it out. But it was, it was a long haul to get to the first feature.
You work with several important directors, among which with Stillman, Milos Forman, and it's Mark and how
Larry Clark and
Larry Clark and Harmony Korine
and Harmony. Sorry, I talk about freedom.
Yeah.
That was like, it was interesting because right after doing The People versus Larry Flint, which was my first studio film, and it was like working with Milos was like boot camp. It was really tough. And then right after that, doing Gummo, it was like, I always thought it was sort of like a projectile vomit after that. I was just like, it was 11 weeks of just crazy. I kind of just worked everything in a very intuitive and fun way. I had a great time with it.
Can you describe some of this? The difference in their approach. Much leverage this different director give you. It's
so hard. It's like everybody's different. Everybody's different. Milos was very interestingly controlling during shooting on The People vs. Larry Flint. He hadn't made a film in about 7 years, and he was very adamant about he wanted something that was like the the Chem editing machine, which had like 3 heads that you could have 3 picture heads up at once, because he liked to do multiple cameras. And the only digital way to do that was within something called the Heavyworks. And it was this big monstrous thing, and I had to relearn that because I had just done Avid on Flirting with Disaster. That's another film. I worked with David O. Russell, who is a wonderfully inventive madman. I say that in a very positive way. But it was with Milos. He was like during the first week of shooting, there was I sort of ran out of something, and I did a couple of versions of one scene because I just had this one scene to do, and he was like, but not 3 scenes, do 10 versions, like, and then so everything I was like during that time was like reinventing these scenes over and over again. And then when he came in after shooting and we worked together, it was like from 9:30 in the morning till about 10 at night. We just worked together, and it was very intense. And I never saw him ingest any food. He just smoked cigars and drank espresso. I think he ate a meal at like midnight, a heavy meal at midnight. Milos, unfortunately, is not with us anymore, but that might have been part of it.
Raise your hand if you have any question. There is one right there.
Yes. Yes.
One thing I'm curious about is who consistently gave you like the most number of like takes as you were going through the edits?
Oh, in different with different directors?
No. As you're cutting this,
I get all the takes.
Well. I mean, who consistently gave you like the most number of like good takes?
Oh, which actor?
Yeah.
Which actor? Oh, that's hard to say. I'd say Rafe. Rafe was pretty amazing. But to be honest with you, they were all great. They were all really strong, and they gave a lot of variety. One thing that was very interesting, the approach to this was, especially with when you talk about the one room, was, and this is something I think Mark definitely does on Succession as well, is everyone's mic'd, even the cooks. Like everyone's mic'd for every take. And everybody was like constantly inventing. There's a lot of improvisation. And like the first cut I did, the first pass with all of the improvisation plus the entire script was like in 2 hours and 40 minutes. And some stuff was brilliant, but you have to be very judicious about it, and you have to figure. And again, the challenges of hitting the comedy, hitting the tension, hitting the horror. You just have there's a lot of babies you have to kill, things you love.
And the fact of having everyone mic, which means that everybody's sound is recorded, gives you freedom
it's so interesting.
To put in and out, go in and out.
Do a kind of a confluence. It's kind of you'll notice there's a lot of left and right, and the sound sort of where the voices are coming from every direction.
That was Altman's. One of the Altman's.
Yes, he was. He's very influenced by Altman. Yes.
And you killed babies brilliantly.
Oh well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question: the slaughter of the innocents. That's my thing.
So I'm just curious. Do you have some thought about what was the chef saying to Tyler that caused him to hang himself?
What he was actually, what Rafe was literally telling him was, he was talking about the Romans who, in disgrace, would have to like kill themselves to save face, but we never wanted that to be heard ever. And
but it was in the script.
But no, it wasn't in the script. That was what Rafe just said. In the script, it's that you don't hear.
I believe that typically in a story there has to be inherent truths to touch people. What were the inherent truths in this story that you tried to convey?
I would say that the frustrations of being a very intense and committed artist, and that was what Chef was. He was, yes, out of his mind too, but he really meant it, the work, and he was in many ways judging those who like consume it and don't understand it.
The Roman suicide was the big scene with Michael Gazzo in Godfather 2, where Robert Duvall explains to him that's what you have to do.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
was-
So he was probably quoting it.
Yeah, when I was fortunate enough to edit about 4 films for Robert Duvall that he directed,
Oh, cool.
a couple he was in,
Mm-hmm.
2 were documentary type films. But but that was a great scene. Bobby loved giving Michael Gazzo, that information, that idea.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Thank you for your work. Terrific.
Oh, thank
Did
you.
you work with a scratch track that you chose?
Oh, yes. I chose all the temp music. That's what I do on all the films. And on this one, it was the score from, God, I'm blanking out. It's terrible. Hereditary, which was Colin Stetson, who ended up, we reached out to him. But I also used Schubert. I used the Trout.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I
because it
didn't-
has
I
so much
didn't know
verve,
this sugar.
you know.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like for the
That's very-
changes of courses, like that very sharp violin, and yeah,
The violin stuff. Yeah.
and that inspired Colin too. But Colin did a wonderful job. I love his score.
Is it often that an editor can do the temp? He chooses the temp, and how close?
It's kind of the way it works.
rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how close did you usually get from what you have to the final? I mean, are there times where it's almost it's the same?
Well, there's some things like with the Many Saints of Newark. There was no score. It was all songs, and that I chose quite a few of them. But there was music editors involved too. But and like with Metropolitan, very interestingly, that was a situation where I had actually, it wasn't my absolute first film. I had done this other very funky, like it was sort of a performance film that was loosely based on the Godard's Band Apart, but it was a musical. And the composer of it was really interesting. He was good. So I immediately did Metropolitan after that. So we drew to Tom, who was the composer, who had a lot of he had a lot of things like in his kind of, we'll call it in his trunk, and so we could just sort of listen to some stuff, and we found he had a great sensibility. We found the one theme that we called "You'll See Me," which was more of the romantic theme, and we found the Metropolitan Begin, which is the da 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 da. It was very beautiful, and the thing was, it was just I temped the movie on 16 millimeter with that just piano on recorded on a cassette, and this was on a 16 flatbed. And so we eventually said, well, we got to figure out, we got to produce it, because it's it's got to be believable in these Deb parties, sort of like a Peter Duchin kind of sound. And we had to reach out to someone who could pull that off. And we found this wonderful composer and producer who was working on the Cole Porter Anything Goes at Lincoln Center, and he put together an 8-hour session of the most amazing musicians, and they just knocked this out. Plus, did the string quartets that were within it too, and that was just really amazing, and did it very economically and very, very well.
I think right there.
Yes.
Hi, I have so many questions. I don't know which one to choose. It seemed to you, I forgot exactly how you put it, something about the chef, about his talent and commitment to his talent and what he was doing, but it seemed to me like he was a total sociopath.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, many artists are.
Oh, thank you.
Sadly.
Lovely to think about. But I guess my question is, I don't know if this is your area, but all these people were terrified and upset and outraged by the situation they found themselves in, yet at the end, they all seemed complicit in the self-destruction. Nobody ran out the door with the woman who left. Nobody seemed interested in leaving. They all kind of sat around and waited to be
accepted their lot.
Yeah, because it seemed like he had a vendetta against all of these people for things they had done that he felt were wrong.
Partially.
May I ask you one more question?
Of course.
I realize that the movie is shot in pieces, and not everybody works together at the same time and all that. But with such a horror story, which you didn't warn us, I mean, this is a horror story. It was, oh my God. Did the actors themselves, while they're doing this, playing this out, did they know what was happening with this story?
they knew
And were they
everything.
upset by it? Because I've heard.
No, they're very committed actors who were very on with the bizarre and absurd tone of this movie, and they committed to that and brought forward these amazing performances which ride the absurd and the real. You feel them as human beings, but the situations and the humor are like on another plane, and they got it. That was one thing. It was a very interesting thing. The two writers just wrote something. I forgot what it was on, but they talked very much about how the kind of magic of the movie is that everybody got it. Everybody involved understood the tone and went with it. Everybody, yeah. It was a really wonderful collaboration, an unusually strong one. Yes.
Being an editor.
Our chef, our other chef. We had, I have to tell you, we had the most amazing situation earlier. This gentleman, I have to show you this. This is the menu of the dinner we just had before this, and it was extraordinary.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't expect that. Well, Chris, you did an amazing job with the film, and knowing that you had to sift through hours and hours of
That's
film.
just what I do.
Right. There must be, your top favorite scene, one, that made it to the film. That's one. And two would be, what would be your favorite scene that didn't make it, that we didn't get to experience?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, to tell you the truth, everything that I cut out, I felt needed to go. There were like three setup scenes in the beginning that just weren't accumulating quickly enough, and there was a coda at the end. Like originally in the script, when she goes into the secret room and sees the radio, in the original script, you didn't reveal the burger, the picture of the burger. And the end was actually a coda after the next day with like the ruins, and this was shot, the ruins of the restaurant steaming and like body bags and stuff. And then they blow up the silver door. And the silver door is also a visual thing from the Exterminating Angel. And so they blow up the door, and then the camera moves in and reveals the shot of him as a young man flipping the burger, and it didn't play well. So we reworked it so that she actually, that was like a cheated shot of her actually seeing it. Oh, gee, well, that's where it becomes, like all my children. I can't make a choice. No, I love the really challenging scenes, like the Jeremy, the mess. The mess was really challenging to make that really fly and play.
Your filmography is so varied.
It's fun. I have a good time.
Yeah, it's really fun. But it's when do you normally find the? It's just the script that find the tone, or how do you find the tone of a film? Because they're so different.
Oh, gee, it's how do you find? It's such it's an unknown in many ways. You know what I'm saying? It's like you have to, I was fortunate to have such an early experience with Metropolitan having a very strong early film, and that helped me in many ways to be discerning. And I just try to be discerning. Sometimes you get a little sometimes there's a kind of a payday that, you know, that you regret maybe, but I've tried not to have too many of those. Yes?
Anyone else?
Anybody else? Yes?
The final scene was like very reminiscent of Midsummer. Could you sort of Hereditary was or at least the soundtrack?
You mean the sound, the music?
Well, the music and both
The high angles? Well, those are right out of Chef's Table. Yeah, the setup of the s'mores. That was.
Well, I mean the entire ignition, you know, because Midsummer ends with like.
Oh, that's true. That is true. But Midsummer wasn't a touchstone to this. Though I have a great deal of admiration for Ari Aster, and I love the movie.
I think there's one here.
Yes.
Hold on, the mic.
This movie was nothing like, it's like I've never seen anything like it.
It's very unusual.
It was
That's what drew me to it.
very
Like the-
psychologically challenging.
Yeah. Oh, nuts.
But it did call to mind a movie that I loved from long ago,
Yes.
and it was a Peter Greenaway movie.
Oh, the
Cook
draft.
the Thief.
Oh, the Cook the Thief. Yeah.
wife and her
I hear
lover.
you. Yeah, yeah.
And I loved the movie because stylistically, it reminded me a little bit of that movie. But this one, what you did psychologically with the way the camera moved and the way that you caught, you know, expressions, just, and they said so many things, you know. But I really appreciated the similarities between those
Cool.
two films.
Yeah, that's an interesting film.
Speaking of influences and similarities, if you have to mention what some of your inspiration, like master editors or people that have really whose work have influenced you a lot.
Cecile de Cujas, you know, who did The Breathless, and actually, I really love her work on, and it was influential in a weird way, My Night at Maud's, which is incredibly like reductive, which like on a film like Capote, it's really super reductive, you know, like keeping it really like
Tight. Yeah.
like tense and holding on things. But then things like the madness of this or something like Kids, it's like, you know, a whole other thing. Yes, ma'am. Oh yes, Ralph was definitely an influence. I really love the producers. It's amazing, and all of his work with Woody Allen and with Sidney Lumet too, like The Pawnbroker. And I had an interesting experience with Ralph. Ralph was like the kind of king of curmudgeons. It's absolutely, and it was I had cut this really awful movie with Jackie Mason, the comedian. This was like in 1984. I was an assistant, but I got bumped up because the editor was fired. It was just very weird. And so I did a pass on this thing. Then they just disappeared. And the producers came back a year later, and they had another movie, and Ralph was the director of it. And Sonia Polanski was the editor of it, and Sonia is someone that I've known for years. And so I did a recut of the thing under Ralph's supervision, and he was very supportive. He really liked what I did, and actually through that I got this job I wanted very much, which was I just got an apprentice job on The Color of Money to work with Marty and Thelma. And I also worked on Marty's archive for about 6 months. But that was a thing that I had to stop because, you know, I could be doing that until I'm 80, and they just look at you as the same thing. And it was like, I don't think that's going to work. But it helped me get a short film because it looked good on my resume.
Yeah, that Marty's archive is something a lot of people got stuck
It's
for
incredible.
years.
Oh God, yeah. But I had access to all those films too. So I was like taking like 3 VHSs at home at night. You know, this great. God, he had every single. And interestingly, at that time, Michael Powell was alive and married to to Thelma, and we got to know
Thelma is
Michael.
Thelma Schoonmaker, Scorsese's longtime editor.
Yeah, she's amazing. And interestingly, Thelma and I were both nominated in 2012, I for Moneyball and she for Hugo, and she was very gracious.
I think there's one question there. I see a hand. Sorry, there's...
What kind of feedback are you getting? I mean, here it's got to be positive because everybody has stayed to hear you. But throughout the country, can you discuss that at all?
You mean for the movie?
Yeah, the feedback.
Oh, it's
from
been it's
people.
been quite positive. Yes, we've had, if you check, like we're like an 89 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very strong, and very few detractors. So it's been, it's been good. And it's having a strong theatrical release. I mean, Searchlight has been fantastic. I mean, they're so supportive of it. And it's like their support has been such that they put it out in theaters only in 3,100 theaters globally. It's made over 50 million at this point in 3 weeks. And it's kind of awesome for such a weird, dark movie. It's dark.
Well,
Very dark.
this is all we have time for. We have another screening coming. But thank you, Chris, so much.
Really, it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you all for coming.